While I was in the Q course, 9/11 happened. The towers were hit. They came in and said, hey, there was a plane that crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. A few minutes later, they came back in and said, a second tower was hit. We may be going to war. This is super unpopular, what I'm going to say, because I've heard multiple people say it, but nobody cares who you think you were in the military. They don't. I grew up in a trailer house behind my grandmother's home. I did not excel in school. And so the military gave me the opportunity, the training, the resources I needed to excel. All I had to do was take it.
Welcome to Veterans Corner. I'm George Hinestrosa, an Air Force and Army retired veteran of 25 years and business owner for 9 years. Here on the show, we explore how military experience transforms into business success. Each episode features veterans who've built thriving businesses, sharing strategies that turn military training into entrepreneurial advantage. The mission is to inspire and equip transitioning service members with practical knowledge and real-world insights from veterans who've built their businesses in many different industries. And today's guest is Jerry Arteaga. Welcome to Veterans Corner, Jerry.
George, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. What does it take to lead a 12-man team into a crisis halfway around the world? And what does that have to do with buying and integrating roofing companies across America? Jerry Arteaga spent 20 years in Special Forces, the Green Berets. He wasn't just in Special Forces. He was on the Crisis Response Force, the teams that get called when things have gone wrong, the strategic reserves, the last resort. He learned to plan under pressure, to execute flawlessly, to turn chaos into clarity. But here's where it gets interesting. While still in uniform, Jerry went to Capitol Hill. He became a Congressional Defense Fellow. Then, the Army's Intelligence Legislative Liaison to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He learned how decisions get made at the highest levels, how to influence without authority, how to navigate complexity when billions of dollars and national security hang in the balance. After retiring from 23 years of service to our great nation, he joined Cold Bore Capital, a lower middle market private equity firm built by veterans for veterans. He started as a regional executive officer, parachuting into struggling companies across multiple industries, pharmacies, dental practice, landscaping companies, distribution operations. His job? Fix what's broken, integrate what's been acquired, create value where others saw only problems. And he was good at it, really good. So good that by 2024, he wasn't fixing companies anymore. He was building and running one. Today, Jerry is the CEO of Valor Exterior Partners, a private equity-backed platform acquiring and integrating residential roofing and exterior services, companies across the Midwest and Northeast. He's building something big. But here's what keeps me up at night about Jerry's story. Most people spend their entire careers learning one way to lead, one industry, one playbook. Jerry has mastered three completely different worlds: military special operations, high-stakes government relations, and private equity value creation. Each one requires different skills, different networks, different ways of thinking. Again, Jerry, welcome to the show. I'm thrilled to have you on here because you are definitely a unique individual, and we want some of that to rub off on us. So let's start, Jerry, with again, and I start this with everyone. What compelled you? What brought you to serve our great nation? What were the inroads in your younger years?
Yeah, I grew up in a relatively small town in South Texas. Not a lot of opportunity, especially for a Hispanic male with high school education, which I have to admit I didn't do too well in high school. And so, at 17 and a half, I kind of felt like, my calling was the military, to try to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, if you will. The military is known for instilling discipline and structure into the lives of young men and women, and I felt at the time that that's what I needed. So 3 days after graduating high school, I departed off to Fort Benning, Georgia, to become an 11 Bravo,
Wow.
and that kind of set my course, in motion. I spent 2 years at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, and a close friend of mine there came up to me one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to be going to selection. Do you want to come?" And I, at the time I was, I don't know, 18 and a half, maybe 19. I looked at him and said, "What is that?" And he said, Special Forces. I said, "Oh, okay, cool." Like, I still had this befuddled look on my face. And he
Right.
said, "Rambo." I said, "Oh, Rambo, count me in."
Right.
Right? We all know
Yeah.
that that's not the case, but that was my,
Right.
that
I
was
mean, we
kind of
all
the
saw the
image.
movies, right? We all saw
Yeah,
the
yeah,
movies,
exactly.
Top Gun, Rambo. I mean,
Yeah,
those were all in
sure.
vogue. Yeah.
So, a couple weeks later, we went off to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for Special Forces selection and assessment. 3 weeks later, I was one of the, 30% that were selected. And 6 months later, I was in the Q course.
Wow.
Yep, in the
Wow.
qualification course. So,
So before we go any further, Jerry, okay, that's right there is saying a lot, right? So first of all, you made a decision to go in. You wanted discipline, okay? So you were bright-minded at that time already, thinking logically. You go in, you spend a few years in there, and then you go right into selection. So you must have had a little bit. I mean, the infantry must have prepared you as an 11 Bravo physically to go through selection because, again, going through selection and being selected as a percentage of all of the applicants is no small thing.
yeah, I attribute it to being 19, right? At 19, there's nothing hard but your head, right? And
Right.
so, and being in the infantry, the mindset, at least in selection is, there's no, they give you a task, they give you a condition, but no standard, right? Go do your best, whatever the event is.
Right.
And in the infantry, you kind of carry heavy things for long distances and follow the guy in front of you.
Hmm.
So selection wasn't too difficult, in my
Right.
opinion. This is talking, 30 years ago now,
Sure.
or so. But yeah, I mean, the infantry did prepare me physically, I think mentally, because there are mental and
Right.
academic components of selection.
Sure. Sure.
I think that my schooling prepared me for that piece, but
Right.
yeah, it was definitely physically challenging, but the infantry did prepare me well for it.
Great, great. So just tell us a little bit then, because a lot of people, we all wonder about selection. I mean, I worked with special operations as a psychological operations specialist, and we do work with all the special, guys. But just for the audience, what exactly, as a young man going into this kind of field, what was going in your mind now? What am I getting myself into? Were you thinking, wow, now this is no joke here. This is a little bit more than Rambo television.
Yeah, so when I decided to go to Special Forces Selection and Assessment, it was pre 9/11. So from my perspective, it was just an opportunity to be part of an elite force and receive additional training. So, I wasn't
Right.
airborne qualified. I didn't know all of the nuances and what the mission sets were for Special
Hmm.
Forces. So I can't say that I wanted to do these high speed, low drag
Hmm.
things because I really didn't know about them. I just knew that Special Forces, they were special, right? They wore
Hmm.
a cool little green hat and they had a tab that I didn't have
Right.
any tab. And,
Right.
at 19, that's what you're kind of looking at. It's like,
Right. Right.
I want
Right.
to look different. I want to be something special. Now,
Right.
while I was in the Q course, 9/11 happened. The towers were hit when
Mm.
I was in the MOS portion of the 18 Echo course. So I'll never forget that day. I was learning about antenna theory. I was a Special Forces communicator. That was my first MOS. And they came in and said, "Hey, there was a plane that crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. If you have
Hmm.
family members that work there, you can step out and make a phone call." A few minutes later, they came back in and said, "A second tower was hit. We may be going to war." And that's when kind of things became real, right? Because Special Forces,
Hmm.
tip of the spear, we knew we would be the first ones to go. That was obviously 9/11,
Right.
2001. I was assigned to the 7th Special Forces Group a few months later, and I actually didn't participate in the war until 2005.
Wow. Okay. A lot of preparation. And I remember that 9/11 day, I was standing outside the language school, getting ready to go into language school at the building there on Fort Bragg, where, I assume you probably went through
Oh, we were in
language
the
school.
same building then. Oh yeah,
Yeah, we were in
I
the
was
same
in
building.
yeah, I
Exactly.
was
That's
in the
what I'm
JFK
saying.
building. Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure. We're in
I
the
was
same building.
standing
Yep.
outside in line waiting to get processed, and you were probably already in the building.
Yep, I was in
So,
class. Sure was.
yeah. Wonderful. So, Jerry, so before we getting into a little bit more of the entrepreneurial stuff, and I like to go through the mental gymnastics, right? So now you become a special forces. Just share a little bit about maybe one or two of the really challenging portions of operating in that environment, not mission wise, but just mentally, what you had to learn being in that environment, being surrounded by professionals such as yourself. And maybe some of the negative stuff that you may have encountered, right? Because we experience all of it in the military, right? Good, bad, and ugly. So, just for the audience,
Yeah, I think, and I didn't spend a lot of time in, we'll call it the big army.
right,
So I didn't necessarily have, this wasn't really ingrained in me, but I think that one of the things that a lot of folks kind of struggle with as they go from kind of big army units into special operations is you have a lot of latitude and leeway. You're oftentimes operating in austere environments with little to no real direct oversight, just kind of here's the mission, here's your left and right limits, like go do good things. And so learning how to operate in those environments and really take the time to analyze the situation, identify the risks, how do we mitigate them, and then create the plan to move forward. Changing mindset from the infantry, where I just said earlier, follow the guy in front of you, carry heavy things long distances, I'll tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it. In
right,
special operations, that's totally different. In special operations, it's, we need to capture the bridge, fill in the blank, right? In the big army, it's we need to capture the bridge, and here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do, and so it's kind of, you're just there executing what you're told. Special operations, you have to fill in all those blanks. And part of the bad side of it is directly correlates to having all that latitude. You're kind of given enough rope to hang yourself, and in the sense that guys make bad decisions, and so that's, in my opinion, that's kind of the negative side of it. Is
right,
not every operator is created equally.
right.
And we have bad apples too, and unfortunately those bad apples sometimes overshadow all the good things that we do. But that's probably one of the most challenging things is now that you have all the leeway, authority, and
Right.
resources, continuing to do, as Ranger Creed says, do the right thing even when
Right.
nobody's looking. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So, Jerry, so now you're in transition mode. Let's go now to your transition mode, and you're going to spend some time at higher levels of outside of the regular army. As we mentioned in the beginning, talk to us a little about those experiences. We're more involved with more civilian types, or just less military type people.
Yeah, sure. So I want to say my transition into kind of the civilian mindset happened once my team time was going to be done. So I ended my kind of operational special forces career, if you will, as a team sergeant in the 7th Special Forces Group, Commanders in Extremis Force, what used to be called, now it's called Commanders Response Force, and I knew from then on that my roles were going to be largely administrative, S3 battalion,
Right.
and I wasn't quite sure that that's what I wanted to do. So I was fortunate enough that throughout my career, my earlier career days, I was able to get a bachelor's using tuition assistance from Norwich University. It kind of set me up for my next step after being a team sergeant. I applied to the National Defense University. They have a master's in strategic studies that is focused on the special operations community. They take NCOs and enlisted. So I applied for that as I was finishing up my team time, and I was subsequently selected for it. So I was back in the JFK building at
Right.
Fort Bragg, going to the National Defense University as a full-time master's student. and it's a 1-year program, 10 months. It's a 1-year program. And while I was there, I really got into the academic mode. I really enjoyed what I was doing. So I started to look for jobs. I went on to the Milper messages and like, what out there could I do outside of being a battalion S3 sergeant major or a company sergeant major, or just the traditional roles. And that's when I stumbled across the message advertising the legislative liaison or defense fellow job. So this program, they select about 40 individuals from the Army. 38 of them are officers, typically majors, lieutenant colonels, and they take 2 NCOs a year. Obviously, thousands of applications go in. But while I was at NDU, I put my application in, I interviewed, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the 2 NCOs selected as fellows. So when I graduated from NDU, I went directly to kind of Washington, D.C. to be part of this fellowship. And again, I was fortunate enough that they sent me to George Washington University to get another master's degree in legislative affairs. So basically how the government works, how, I say how to be a lobbyist.
Yeah.
And so once I took the role of defense fellow, it's a 40-month program. I no longer really wore a uniform. It's a suit and tie. And so the program starts off with the first 12 months you work in the personal office of a member of Congress. So that could be a senator or a representative. I was selected to work in the Senate. So I worked in Senator Richard Burr's office. He was at the time the senior senator for North Carolina. And I worked in conjunction with his military legislative advisor. His name was Cole Lyle. He's still very active on the Hill as part of the American Legion. And so Cole and I worked on the Senator's Department of Defense portfolio and VA, as long as it didn't have to do with intelligence. And so for a year, we spoke to CEOs and business leaders in North Carolina looking to expand the military-industrial complex of North Carolina. So getting companies to move to North Carolina, or how do we grow the military business sector in North Carolina.
Right.
And then I also helped out with kind of VA requests and whatnot from constituents. So that was 12 months. Immediately following that is when I was assigned as the legislative liaison to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Just so happened Senator Richard Burr was the chairman of that committee. So it kind of made sense, right?
Yeah.
And so for the next, call it 24 months or so, I worked as the primary point of contact between the Army G2 and the Senate Intelligence Committee and their staff, where I was able to convey the Army's message as it pertained to Army intelligence funding to the members of that committee. So, part of that was taking members and or their staff around the world to see military intelligence equities that we wanted to kind of have an impact, whether it be through the Senate Intelligence Act or the National Defense Authorization Act funding.
Wow. So I just want to highlight something here, and I'm talking about more of the psychological impact. And you're impacting me by telling me these things, and I'm seeing a pattern here, right? So we started off the conversation. You started off by saying you came from Latino background. You didn't feel like maybe schooling was your thing, and you figured you'd go into the service and they'd square you away. But just look at exactly when we think this way. Our point of views sometimes are like blinders, right? Because we are brought up in an environment where maybe we aren't seeing the big picture. Now you're getting thrown into the big picture, and you're discovering, oh wow, I can do this, I can do that, I can do all these things. Not only that, not only did you go through all these incredibly difficult courses, you've even jumped into now. Getting your bachelor's and working on your master's and doing all these things, and you've superseded anything that you may have thought at the beginning of the journey, right? So I want to put it out to all veterans out there. Don't box yourself in, okay? Jerry is the perfect example of what just doing what's in front of you and doing it to the best of your ability. You create your own avenues and your own doors and your own way and your own destiny, in fact. Am I off? Am I off the point there, Jerry? Or
No, no, I'd actually like to add on to that. Look, I think that especially as a young enlisted guy, I think it's easy to kind of rest on your laurels and, hey, as long as I'm at formation and I'm at the right place, right time, right uniform, I'm going to be good to go. The military has some amazing opportunities. No one is going to put them in front of you. You have to look for them. And unfortunately, the mindset of a lot of, especially in the NCO realm, I feel, the mindset of a lot of guys is, I never got the opportunity to do that, so I'm not going to help you do it. Or they just don't know about it, right?
right,
And so to me, it's incumbent upon the individual to read the Milper messages, to look for the next job, to what do I need to do to further advance myself, not only in the military, but to prepare myself to exit. Because as military members transition, it's well known, we lose purpose. Especially someone who's done 23, 15,
right.
20 years, you lose purpose to some degree. So for me, I get asked all the time, what was the hardest part about transition for you?
Right.
I was fortunate enough to where I started my transition, in my opinion, 5 years before I actually retired. So once I went to NDU as a student, I was never in charge of soldiers again. Right? I was a student, I was on the hill, I was in charge of myself. But in general, to a degree, your entire military career, you're told what to do, where to be, what to wear, what time to be there. Everything is, you just have to show up.
Right.
The hardest part of exiting the military for me was you no longer have that.
Right.
Right? You have to get up and find what I'm supposed to do, where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to wear. And I think that if guys don't prepare themselves in the years leading up to a transition, they're setting themselves up for failure.
Right.
You have to start expanding your network. And I know network is kind of everybody talks about it and whatnot, but what I mean is that's how I got into to where I'm at now, and I can talk about that shortly. But expand your network beyond the military. What do you think you want to do? Because the stat is out there. I believe it's something like 40 or 60, I can't remember, percent of veterans leave their first post-military job in the first year.
Right.
And it's because I think a lot of people think they know what they want to do, then they get there and they don't, or they take the first job that comes to them because they're worried they're not going to be able to find one, and it just kind of sets them on the wrong trajectory. I think preparing yourself in the 2 to 3 years before you retire is key to post-military success.
It's almost like being a prepper, right?
For sure, yeah.
Like being a prepper.
And
You
look,
don't see it, but you're saying, well, something's going to come in the future. Something's going to happen with me, and I better start doing something now, and use my time while while I have this security, I'm in a comfortable zone here that I can manage. Let me start just prepping a little bit. Let me just add a few little things into my kit bag and just see where it all goes, right? But at least you have it there. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
absolutely. And another common mistake that people make is they believe that their military position actually carries some sort of weight in the civilian world. I'm here. This is super unpopular what I'm going to say because I've heard multiple people say it, but nobody cares who you think you were in the military. They don't. No one's going to ask you for your last 5 NCOERs. No one's going to ask you for your last 5 OERs in the civilian world. What have you done that can directly benefit me and my business today? And a lot of times folks don't know how to directly translate their military experience into civilian experience. I tell people it's exactly the same thing. As an NCO in the military, I was in charge of people, processes, and resources. My metric for success was combat readiness and lethality. Is my team ready to go to combat? And when we get there, can we get the job done? Right? As the CEO of Valor Exterior Partners, as an operating partner working with multiple platforms, I was responsible for people, processes, and resources. The only difference is my metric for success was profitability. How you get there, how you interact with people, how you gain stakeholder buy-in, how you manage and mitigate risk, how you manage, resources and capital, it's all the same. You're just changing the way the message is delivered, and what the widget is. It's no longer beans and bullets. In my case, it's shingles and flashing, right?
Right.
It's subcontractors and distributors. But it's really all the same. And so being able, the veteran who can effectively articulate how their military experience translates into the job that they want really is what determines, in my opinion, their success in these interviews. And so as veterans are preparing for an exit, having these informational interviews with people in the industries that they believe they want to work in are key. Like when you start to talk to people, it shouldn't be in an interview for the first time.
Right. So there's three components. So you have military, right? So you're getting out of the service now and you're transitioning. And so as you're still a young man, you're thinking, so there's corporate work, there's maybe get another government job or start a business, right? Those are kind of the three categories that they give you in TAPS, right? Like, or just do nothing or go or take advantage of your GI Bill, right? And get more training. How did you juggle those? How did you juggle those when you were out processing the military? What was going through your mind? Did you have a family at the time, by the way? I don't know if I asked you this.
I did. I was married at the time.
Okay.
No children though. So
Okay.
so for me, I leveraged my network once I decided that I wanted to retire instead of go back to kind of 7 Special Forces group to take a tactical leadership role. I reached out to my network, and one of my oldest friends, former team leader of mine, he retired. His name's Greg Pavinsky. He retired as a SF lieutenant colonel about 3 years before I was retiring. And he and I stayed in contact throughout the years. But when I finally decided to retire, he was one of the first people I told, and he had already made the transition into private equity. And so I said, hey, Greg, I think I'm done. I'm going to go ahead and retire. I'll be 40. I was 40 at the time when I retired. So I'm still young enough to where a company will invest in me, and I'm fresh. I'm ready to grind. And he said, hey, if you're going to retire, you should really think about going into private equity. Your skills in the military would translate into what we do as an operating partner in PE. And so, we had multiple conversations. I did some research on what the role was, on the company. I spoke to several people, and, I thought it would be a good fit as well. At the time, I had already finished my second master's at George Washington. At the time of this discussion, as I was getting ready to transition, I was actually enrolled in a doctoral program. I was getting a doctorate in educational leadership with a focus in change management. And I had already done all of the coursework and writing my dissertation. But as I was researching private equity, I quickly realized that an MBA would help me be more value add. So in chatting with Greg, I said, hey, like, the more I learn about private equity, do I need an MBA? And Greg said, hey, look, you've already got 2 masters, you're working on a doctorate, you work on the Hill, you can read a P&L, right? And so I'm going to pause there. But what Greg was speaking to, in my opinion, is I had the traits to fill the role. I didn't have the skills necessarily. But in my opinion, having the traits to be a successful operator in whatever field is almost more important than the skills, because you can train the skills, you can't train traits. Right. And so that's kind of the hiring approach that I take now. I hire for traits, train the skill. And so so what Greg said is, hey, look, you've got advanced degrees, you know how to take complex problems and distill them down to where anybody can understand them. You'll learn to read a P&L. And so, I mold over.
P&L being profit and loss, right?
Profit and loss statement. Yeah. So that's kind of one of the financial reports that businesses use to operate. And so I mulled over for a few more weeks and ultimately decided, no, if I want to be value add day one, I should get a master's. And at that point, I put down my dissertation. I applied to and was subsequently accepted to Northwestern's Kellogg School of Business. I went to the executive program. It was life-changing for me. Knowing what I know now about Kellogg and Northwestern, I would only have one master's degree, and it would be an MBA from Kellogg. It just, the way I view the world and view opportunities and the way I look at problems was totally changed by going to business school. So I highly recommend it
Right.
to anybody
And
considering.
also being applicable to many different things, right? So having an MBA like that is like
For sure.
across the board and full horizon thing that you can apply.
For sure.
So, Jerry, wonderful. Thank you so much and you've had, again, your schooling. I mean, it's hard. I finished my bachelor's degree while I was still in the Army, and I started a master's in health and personal development. And I know how excruciatingly time consuming, not difficult to the point you can't do it. It's just you really have to mitigate and you really have to be able to use your time wisely to go through school. And so again, kudos to you, man. So it's just showing me again. I want to talk a little bit about just, and we're moving along here, and I just want to really capture a couple of the highlights of your inner force, right? Because the transitioning veterans that have already maybe retired that will listen to this, or the ones that are just on the fence of what to do, stay in or get out. What drives you, man? Just what is driving you to do these things? What is the inner force? What is your inner dialogue when you're making these decisions, right? Do you have, like, how do you talk to yourself, right? Because and I probably know the answer to that, but I want from your point of view, what are you thinking when you're going through all of these mental gymnastics of going to the next step?
There's a few things that I take into consideration, right? One, I mentioned joining the Army at 17, right? One of my main drivers is the fact that I was born to two 16 and 17-year-old high school dropouts. I grew up in a trailer house behind my grandmother's home. I did not excel in school. And so the military gave me the opportunity, the training, the resources I needed to excel. All I had to do was take it. And so for me, part of my driver is I know where I came from. I don't want to go back to that. So I take advantage of every opportunity that I can. And then the second piece to it is I feel like I'm doing it for 4 other people. So I did 6 combat rotations, 4 to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq, 18 deployments to Latin America and the Caribbean. And 4 teammates of mine didn't come home, and so I feel like I'm living life for 5 people, myself and the 4 that didn't get to come home, and I would be cutting them short if I didn't try to excel at everything I do, and so those are kind of my 2 driving factors.
That's deep, man. So Jerry, so now that where you're at now, tell us a little bit about how do you keep yourself centered? Now you're in the middle of it. Now you're creating business. You're taking all of this private equity. You're creating value for businesses, for people, shareholders. You're still meeting the challenges. How do you make time for yourself? How do you make time for Jerry? And how do you just kind of refocus yourself daily? What are some of the rituals maybe that you go through from getting up to maybe going to bed? Is there, other than the work part of it, what are the things that only Jerry knows about? Obviously, what you can share, but what keeps you centered?
Yeah, so for me, I take the approach of, faith, family, firm, and that's kind of how I rack and stack things. You got to have faith, whatever that is. You got to believe in something.
Right.
I'm a Christian. I
So
put
am I.
God first, and so I always spend time with faith. The second is family, because in my opinion, why is faith above family? Because you got to have faith to have good family.
Right.
You got to have a good relationship with God to help guide you and your family. And then once you have that strong foundation of faith and a family that supports you, whether it's a spouse or a significant other or immediate family, mother, father, brother, sister, it's all lumped into the same one. With that solid base, then you can give everything you have to building the firm, whether it's building your own business, filling, an administrative role, an executive role. But I believe you have to have the first two in line in order to be
Right.
successful at the third. You could put firm first, and I'm sure you'll build a great company, but internally, mentally, it's just not. You're not
Right.
going to be as resilient. You got to have a soft place to land. You got to have somebody to count on, whether that's family or faith.
Right.
And in my opinion, that's what keeps me kind of centered and balanced. And as far as rituals, I mean, it's so cliche, but I do make my bed every morning as soon as I get out of it. I do have sleep routines. I do the same thing before I go to bed. Make sure I get 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of sleep. I mean, all the things you can read about in any book. But for me, prioritizing faith, family, firm has worked, and I that's kind of what my guiding light.
Okay. Nutrition, physical fitness.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Making wise choices, both, in your meals and keeping your body healthy.
Right.
Doesn't mean you got to follow a strict diet,
Right.
but
Right.
making good choices helps. What you put in your body is how your body's going to perform, and so definitely diet and exercise.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, thanks, Jerry. So just finishing up here, and I like to finish, we're right at the 36-minute mark here. So
yeah, plenty
I'd
of
like
time.
to, yeah. So I'd like to just ask you, so if you were in a room right now and you wanted to convey some of your, and you've shared a lot of it now, but if you just had a few minutes to spend with some young people that are getting out of the service, young, I mean in their 30s or 40s or early, late 30s, what would you say to them? What would you say to them if you were never going to see them again and you just wanted to really lay it out on the line for them in 2 or 3 minutes? What would you have to say to a group like that don't know what they're going to do next?
Yeah. So what I would tell transitioning service members as they start to prepare for a transition is stay humble and stay hungry. Right. You can't go into a new chapter in your life with an ego. I'll steal it from Kellogg, but you got to be high impact, low ego. Any executive or tactical level frontline employee that I bring on to Valor Career Partners, I tell them, in order to be part of this team, you have to be willing to do cleanup in aisle 4, all the way to giving strategic guidance, to and from the board, and everything in between, because that's the only way this works. I operate on a servant leader model, and so going into a transition with that mindset, in my opinion, is a quick way to success. Stay hungry, as in always be looking to advance. Not necessarily in your career, because you don't want to be chasing the position.
Right.
If you're doing the work, the promotions will come. People notice. And being in the military, I think that we have an advantage, right? We're used to being in the right place, right time, right uniform.
Right.
Teach me the skill if I don't have it, and I'll get it done.
Right.
My inner circle, the executive staff that all of my direct reports, all veterans. It's not by accident. It's because I know what to expect with a retired E8 Marine. I know what to expect from a retired Lieutenant Colonel Special Forces operator, right? So as we transition into the civilian world, you're not always working with the same type of people that you did in the military. And so for me, hiring veterans that are humble and still hungry is a path to success.
Right. Right.
But again, I'll go back to another comment: is no one cares who you thought you were in the military.
Right.
Yep, you got to prove yourself all over again.
Well, thank you, Jerry. Thank you so much for your time today. And again, I know we could go on for hours and we could nitpick at things, but I just want to keep the crux of the matter where it should be, right? And I appreciate your life. I thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you're still doing. And I'm just trying to put out, some tidbits here from people, professionals like yourself that have done it, that have gone through it, through the grind, and that are doing it and are still doing it and are helping others to do it. And and again, anyone who is in the service and getting out, just know that you have exactly what Jerry has if you can breathe and you can think and you've been taught and use what you've been taught and you just follow your instincts and follow your better judgment, you will make the right decisions. Don't be afraid to go forward. So, Jerry, unless you have any other final words just for now, anything you'd like to finish up with, or?
No, look, for your listeners, I always take calls for veterans. They can reach out on LinkedIn. I'll get back to you. Again, somebody took a chance and took my call, so I try to pay it forward. And then selfishly, any veterans living in the Northeast that are looking to transition, contact me. I'm sure we have some leadership role at some site in some state. I love bringing on veterans.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jerry, so much. So that wraps up today's episode of Veterans Corner. A huge thank you to Jerry Arteaga for sharing his story. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share it. Join the conversation by sharing your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay strong, and remember, you are never alone.